got everything straightened out, so I don't need to know if I have to pursue it.
Cut it short. Cut it short.
Well, as I was mentioning, we're talking about hurricane-proofing buildings on Hawaii Island, an island that has never had a hurricane, and the cost of those improvements. And I said there were two precedents that I know of. One is the UHH student housing up on Committee Street, which I tried to look into, and the other one is the $18.1 million hurricane-proof Ka'u Gym. And I wrote both Brittany and Bob Herkes. I've heard back from Bob Herkes. I understand Brittany is off the island. I asked them three very specific questions. What specific hurricane-proof design features were included in this project? What did these hurricane-proof design features add to the total cost? What was the demonstrated need to design this facility as a hurricane-proof shelter in a community and on an island that have never had a hurricane? I have not heard back from Brittany, but I heard back from Bob Herkes, who you all know was when he was in the legislature, or still in the legislature, he was very involved in the building codes, very involved in the hurricane issues. He came before this board to speak during the Bill 270 process. He wrote you a letter during the 270 process. And Bob had an extended answer, but I'm going to just read the important part because I know you've got a lot to do here today. And Bob wrote, "Having it hurricane resistant is a waste of money, but I have not been able to get revised building codes to correct this problem." And that's coming right from Bob Herkes, our representative. And county council members, how many millions upon millions of our tax dollars are we squandering? And how much longer are you going to allow this squandering of our tax dollars to continue? The Chicago Building Code, which requires the hurricane-proof needs to be rescinded. We asked the state to rescind the PLDC, and that's the correct thing to do. We ask you to rescind the Chicago Building Code so we no longer have these hurricane requirements for Hawaii Island that continue to squander our dollars. I'm not speaking about this building at all, or the money for the design of it. I'm speaking about the future requirements, the expense requirements that would be required for this building if it was built here. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ernst. Barbara, will you introduce your first speaker, please?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I believe our testifier is going to wait until after the presentation.
Thank you. Manu, you don't have any testifiers if I remember correctly. All right, so we're back to Hilo. Our next testifier, please introduce yourself.
Madam Chair, our next testifier is Corey Harding, speaking on Papaikou Resolution 308.
Ms. Harding, excuse me. You're going to get only one opportunity to testify. It's either now or after the presentation. Do you want to go now? Because you won't be allowed to testify. Go ahead then.
Okay. Corey Hardin for Sierra Club Mokuloa Group, speaking in support of Resolution 308. Papaikou Beach is an opportunity to act on three larger issues. One is the worldwide privatizing of the commons. Once everyone could graze their cows in common pastures, and once we didn't have leases in the ocean. The second is also a worldwide issue, land-based culture versus privatization, or the Aina versus real estate. The Great Mahele was only about 150 years ago. Before that, there were millennium of spiritual, cultural, and working relationship with the land. The land was for everyone, like water or air. The third issue is shorelines, public access to shorelines as building reaches into remote areas. Hawaii has seen years of struggles over access. Papaikou is an opportunity to set a precedent for using the tool of eminent domain to address all three issues, the commons, the Aina, and shoreline access. Today, the landowners, Ms. Prickett and Mr. Waugh, are doing a second presentation at a county council event. We urge that the council offer presentation time also to supporters of increased public access. We do commend the landowners for offering to finance a new trail on the Shropshire property, demolish the old mill, and clean up hazards. But we're concerned that the Shropshire route may require bulldozing that brings erosion with runoff that impacts nearshore waters and reefs. We also commend the landowners for building a safe trail to the beach at their expense, opening to the public most days, and trying to keep the beach clean and safe. But the beach is closed at some of the best times for subsistence fishing, surfing, or just being on a Hawaiian beach. And it can be closed by decision of one or two people for a day or forever, though families have been going there for generations. Support for access is tremendous. 275 people counted at the last hearing, many wearing armbands in support of access. Out of 40-odd testifiers, only 3 supported the status quo, and there's those 5,000 petition signatures supporting access. Please move forward today on the precedent of using eminent domain to protect the commons, the Aina, and shoreline access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harden. Kayla, please call your next testifier.
Our next testifier is Jerry Warden, speaking on Resolution 308, Papaikou.
Jerry Warren, Na'alehu. In regard to Papaikou, in the early 2000s, John Cross told the residents of Na'alehu that C. Brewer will soon cease to exist. Then he went to work for the Ed Olson Foundation in Pahala. I was surprised to see him representing C. Brewer in this Papaikou situation. Is C. Brewer still in existence? Who does John Cross work for? C. Brewer left a lot of loose ends in Na'alehu. We have a downtown property owner who has blocked off 2 access roads. These roads were a part of C. Brewer property, and they were used by everybody. Now we have boulders and shrubs blocking our right-of-way. County officials have washed their hands of the whole situation, although Chris Ewan, Nelson Ho, Bobby Jean Leathead Todd were on board when these roads were shut off. John Cross is on the Ka'u CDP steering committee. I took interest in this Papaikou situation because the same thing is happening in Na'alehu, and the same people are still in the mix. Mahalo.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Kayla, please call your next testifier.
Our next testifier is Deborah Ward, speaking on communication 853 and 853.10.
Aloha. Thank you. My name is Deborah Ward. I'm a 30-year Puna resident, a Sierra Club member, a hiker who appreciates access to the Hamakua trails and shoreline. During the past 30 years, I've been involved in several public access and shoreline issues, 2 of which I'd like to briefly touch on today to illustrate the parallels with the Papaikou access issue that's before you. At Honolulu in the late 1980s, just after the inundation of Harry K. Brown Park in Puna, a private developer sought to divert water from the Honolulu stream for a hydroelectric plant. Sierra Club and subsequently surfers intervened because we feared on the marine organisms and the recreational resources of Honolulu Beach. And after 2 years of work, permit for hydroelectric was denied, and the Honolulu Park remains the finest surfing site in the Hilo vicinity. Without continuing community involvement, this site would have been a lost remnant of our past. Instead, it's actually a really important resource that remains important to current surfers, to past surfers, and to their children, and it's maintained by the community in a way that it never was until it became an issue. And I think it's really important to point out that when the community becomes involved in something it loves, it does take care of it, it does protect it. And then the next case I wanted to bring up was Onomea. Back in the same era, back in the early 1990s, Onomea was, and still is, owned by Dan Lupton House and was being developed as a botanic garden. He was advised by the county early in the project that there were traditional access routes, but he still chose to close those access routes, fence the area, put barbed wire up, put no trespassing signs. And there were people both within the community and within Sierra Club that opposed the restriction of access. But nevertheless, there was razor wire strung along the shoreline, even where monk seals were basking on the beach, and on Onomea Beach. Briefly shorten this testimony, but I have provided the testimony in writing. The parallels with these experiences with Papaikou involve testimony and involvement of retaining traditional access for fishing, hiking, swimming, kayaking, and natural resource protection. The Onome case also involves the issue of government or traditional access protected by state law. We believe that's in Papaikou well. And
even if the documentation is less rigorous in your findings, the State Board of Land and Natural Resources did find that Onamea was declared a public right-of-way by the Highways Act of 1892, and we believe that Papaikou has the same access and traditional remnants. So the public use should not be impeded, and maybe the use of eminent domain isn't even necessary if the state and county recognize public access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Bill Walters, speaking on Communication 868, the Multipurpose Event Center.
Thank you for this opportunity, and I want to congratulate Mr. Ikeda at this point for recommending a new multi-purpose center. I can recall when I was in grade school back at Gila Riverside. Gila Riverside School no longer exists, but the Civic Center still exists. I'm glad it does. I hope it does for many years to come. But since then, the community, East Hawaii, has grown substantially. There are now more than 80,000 people on this side of the island, and the Civic Center no longer can hold all the events for this community. Further, Puna has grown and emerged as a community of virtually the same size today as Hilo, and will no doubt be larger in terms of population than Hilo soon. So it would make sense to locate a facility like this and locate it in Puna. We at Shippen would love to see it, of course, in Kea'au. The community needs to determine where a facility like that goes, but let me say that we have spent time and energy to have our planning consultants, PDR, look at our property and see where best a whole community center of buildings should exist, including an expanded police building for the whole region, expanded fire department, probably a library, which Senator Kokobun pushed for many years and is still desired by many, and a multi-purpose center such as this. And we have our thought was to design a center that's not just a row of buildings put anywhere or hodgepodge put here and there, but a center where on top of a hill with nice grass in between, with a nice center, sort of like Kalakaua Park used to be for Hilo way back when. And we think this is just a tremendous opportunity for those of us in this community moving forward to recreate that sense of community around a center like this. So certainly the community needs to determine if this was built, whether it should be put in Hilo or somewhere in Puna or even Hamakua. Let me just say that from the standpoint of WH Shippen Limited, we would be anxious to work with the county and the community on potential locations in Kea'au should that be the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Next testifier, please.
Madam Chair, that's our last testifier before the presentation.
Thank you. There are no other testifiers here in Kona or Waimea or Pahoa, so we are going to now go into a presentation. Would you please come forward? It's up to you.
Ron.
Yes, here they tentatively working. All right, for the members here in the Kona room, the presentation will be over here to our left, and we'll make sure that everything's going well. So turn your mics on by pushing the button, and that face should be on the phone. And please identify yourself by name, each one of you, and then you may begin your presentation.
My name is...
Sorry about that. Council members, at any point during the presentation, if you have a question, wait, no, we haven't taken all the public testimony. Can't do that. Okay, we're going to go through the presentations with no questions from council members because we're still going to be taking public testimony. Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Were these monitors were on earlier?
Yes, they were, and they're part of the system that went down, so your presentation will be up on this screen over here. All right, you may begin. Please identify yourself.
My name is Jim Waugh, and thank you for inviting us here to speak. Resolution 30812 addresses the wrong problem. This is often done when a physical solution is proposed to resolve what turns out to be a human problem. There already is physical access to the ocean that is already open to the public at Papaikou. What the resolution fails to address, and what the current owner also apparently failed to properly address, is community involvement in the management and maintenance of that access. That is the crux of the problem at all county beach parks. This problem has been partially dealt with at several county beach parks by Skibbs Papaikou. Skibbs and his merry men are very unusual people, are in short supply, and so far have not been replicated. This problem has been tentatively raised in the Hamakua CDP, but has not yet been fully addressed there or released for community review, and is a long way from rolling out, even on a pilot project basis. This resolution may have jumped out in front of events in a way that will prove counterproductive, as no mechanism has yet been created that would enable the community to take on a management and malama role on properties, whether privately or publicly owned, particularly with respect to liability and insurance. And there is no local group in Papaikou with a track record to actually do the work. To date, the only entity with a long track record of actually caring for this rich and complex environment is the current owner. No one else has stepped forward even to share this burden except for Skibbs, and even he overreached and had to pull back in order to better focus on his core locations where he has had better luck drawing local people into his efforts. Without a solution to these human problems first, more access purchases only benefit a few users. And here I mean users who really do not care for the environment. They simply use it. And meanwhile, they put those places under enormous environmental and social stress and detract from the enjoyment still other users might have found there. This was the situation at Papaikou before we arrived. Despite our best efforts, this is the situation which partly continues at Papaikou today, although much of the environmental stress has been reduced.
I'm Charlene Prickett. I'm Jim's wife and owner of the land we're discussing. I think there are
Charlene, excuse me, would you hold that microphone really close to you?
Really?
Yes, really close. It's almost uncomfortable.
Better?
Yes,
Better,
much
better?
better because you're soft-spoken. Thank you.
Well, rarely have I been called soft-spoken, so thank you. There, I think, are a number of agendas at play in this issue. For some, I think it is now about winning, setting a precedent. The end justifies the means. For others, it's long-held resentment of loss at the hands of outsiders. For most folks living near Papaikou, I think, and I hope, this is simply a desire to preserve ocean access. These agendas have kind of come together and united to convince the local community that we are moving toward privatizing the beach and denying ocean access. But our track record proves the opposite. We have literally invited the public through our front gate, and despite retribution in the form of vandalism and animosity when we try and deal with bad behavior, we have not locked up our property. We have not ever, do not now, nor do we in the future, intend to deny access to the ocean. We know it is the playground and heritage of the people who have long inhabited this place. Our daughter is a surfer. We have voluntarily permitted access on this land since 1995 with common sense rules in place to protect us and other users, the trail, the beach, ocean, the wildlife. Our rules are taken from the county's book of rules, but we are getting too old to do this alone. We are ready to share that task with the community and the county. We want to work with you to build a workable, beautiful route that is better suited to its purpose, will be a better deal for the county, and will give us some peace and privacy. There are some hoops we must jump through for sure, but working with the county to make something long-lasting that works well is a far better journey than this confrontational process. We've already had 2 meetings about this with the county, and we will seek the cooperation of the adjacent landowner who owns the major portion of the road that would bring the community to a new trailhead. For us, this is not about winning. It's about finding a good solution for us all, for the whole community. So please understand, an alternate access would be county-owned, built by us, with input from the community, managed by the county and the community. Our existing trail would certainly stay open as it has for 18 years until a new alternative route is ready.
I want to go on and try to deal with some of the issues I think that arise from the resolution itself. I'm concerned, I guess, because resolutions of this sort in years hence will be treated as fact because nobody put forward information contrary to what's stated in the resolution. So I'd like to do that. The first thing that I would like to talk about is the beach itself. And I hope in the information package that you got from me, you will read the paragraph that deals with the beach. The point of that is simply to say that this beach is temporary and is a product of the sugar plantation activity. I'd like to show you some of the reasons that I say that. This is a drawing that shows the mouth of the Papaikou stream back in 1878. The little, let me get this to appear. This building is the mill building, the wharf, and the mouth of the stream is here. There is no beach at that time. There was no sand. There were no rocks for the beach to form on, and it was simply the mouth of a stream. There are photographs that support this point of view. This is a view taken in 1878. You can see the stream here in front of that same building that's shown on the previous sketch. This is stream. It's not got any beach. There's no sand, nothing. This is in 1891, a decade or more later. There's a new owner. There's a significant amount, a significant increase in the acreage that is under sugarcane at this point. But even here, the stream is completely open. They're continuing to use the wharf adjacent to the mill to bring boats in, to bring equipment and to ship sugar, and there is no sand. Now this drawing shows what has happened with the beach over a period of time, and I don't know whether you can read this with the scale of the lawn, but let me just try to show that the situation with the open stream mouth and the stream simply flowing into the ocean appears to have lasted beyond 1907, when is recorded the first appearance of sand at all, to 1940, which is when we have a first sense that there actually was a small beach in this area here. And the beach then moved forward. The dates 1940, 1952, 1965, where the date is ahead of the line, show an advancing beach, and they are the dates of air photos that confirm that information. The dates that occur behind those lines are the dates of receding beach, and you can see here, find the mouse, 1980, it had shifted back to this point. 1994, it had shifted back to this point. 2010, it had shifted back to this point here. This is the mouth of Kabui Stream about 1940, and you can see that there is no beach in that photograph. What little beach did exist at that time was away in the back of the picture. The next photograph is going to show a beach that extends from here over to about there. So it occupies all of that space there, which is clearly water on this date. This is an air photo of the mill in 1965, and you can see the crest of the beach is in this vicinity right here. We have had anecdotal reports that there was sand out as far as, I can get the mouse to reappear here. This, which is the cane pit, there was supposedly sand out on this edge of the cane pit. We have no photographic evidence of that, but we have people who told us that. So here's this picture again. I just showed you where the beach was in 1965, the farthest out recorded air photo. 1970 perhaps, anecdotal evidence. Now I want to look at the recession of the beach. You can see in this photograph that the sand has moved back some from the 1965 photograph, but is still here on the side of the shore, quite close to where the water returns to the point. And over on this side, it comes out beyond the end of the mill. Here in 1994, the beach has retreated some from that time. It is now just beyond the end of the mill building. This is the mill building right here, and you can see the beach is, the dark part is where the surf is broken on the beach, so the crest of the beach is at the back of that. And it's slightly beyond the mill itself. Here we are in 2010. Again, look at the same points. In 1980, the sand was about there, extending across to about there somewhere. In this photograph, I don't know if you can make out the wall of the fire room, part of the sugar factory. The crest of the beach is actually invisible in this photograph. It's behind that wall, back about here. The next item that I'd like to deal with is the whereas that claims there is a road to the vicinity of the beach at Papaikou shown on a map. Map dated 1873. This so-called map is actually undated and is merely a surveyor's working sheet. It could not have been drawn for Papaikou before 1878, for it was not until February 1878 that Lyon's field survey was carried out there, and the sheet continued to be developed for a decade or more after that. Lyon was very meticulous in his survey notes, meticulous to label everything. No road is shown in the vicinity of the beach at Papaikou, and I think all of you have got the package that looks something like this. On that package you can see the line that has been referred to in the whereas, and it's unlabeled. Elsewhere, I want to go into this, the notes that the surveyor prepared as he was doing his field survey actually do label that line. And I think it's important that you're aware of that. The surveyor was Lyon. The person who prepared this map that is in the resolution was Lyon. And the person who prepared the only map that I'm aware of that shows this, or that goes on from this survey into a published map was also Lyon. So the same person was involved. There's no question of misinterpretation here. If you look at the last page of that submission, you'll see that on this map, which is Lyon's map, it shows a stream flowing into the ocean at the point that that line is. And I'd like to show you how this works. This is the drawing that was submitted to create the resolution showing the squiggly line right here. This is a drawing taken from the surveyor's notebook. It's a sketch that he did in the field. It shows the old Mamalahoa Highway where it crosses Kapui Stream leading to Papaikou. That's the road. And you'll also see that directly in the pages that I submitted to you. But this is the road here. This is the current county road. The highway is in a slightly different location. No, I have lost the sequence here. Let me just get it back. Yep, so I gotta find the. There it is. On the left is the drawing that's from the surveyor's notebook. On the right is the information that I copied. I simply traced it over top of the surveyor's own drawing to try to simplify it. And you'll see that in addition to the road, there's a blue line, which is Kapui Stream flowing under the bridge. And there is a ditch and a flume. If you look at the surveyor's notes, you'll see those same words, ditch, flume, identifying what that line represents. Oh, the mouse is not great. Disappears when you want it. So this is what I'm calling the black sketch. This is another section from 55B. It shows the same area. You can see the same road If I can ever get, there's the mouse again. If I can show you here, it labels it road, and it shows the same road going down to the same bridge and up the other side where it intersects with the famous flume and ditch. This map carries on to the next section though, and it shows the flume carrying on down. The red sketch follows on from those two and shows the same line, now being interpreted by some people as a road, even though there's no label on it, coming to the mouth of Papaikou Stream and the location of the sugar factory. The mouse, there it is. Oh.
Hilo, we're going to be using a laser pointer on our screen over here. Jeff, can that be seen in Hilo? Okay, hold on, and let's get Jeff to point a camera at that so they can see the dot. And just let us know, Jeff.
No. All the notes works.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you see this? There it is.
Okay.
Okay, so there is the road that I just showed you in the previous one. Okay, there it is. There is the flume. It's actually labeled right there, flume again. Second time it's been called flume. And it corresponds to this sketch over here, which is a little bit simplified, but it has the same essential details. The flume line running here, Papaikou Stream, a little piece of it shown there, and the highway shown over here. These all match up because of these base stations that the surveyor created. They're shown on all of the drawings. So here we are at the thing I'm calling the red sketch, and we'll see this little squiggle here is shown right there, going down to the mill area, to the mouth of Papaikou Stream. This is back to the highway over here at Road 2. Now, if you take those all together, I'm not sure that you'll see it terribly clearly because of the light in the room, but you'll see my black sketch is at the top up there, my green sketch is in the middle, and my red sketch is at the bottom. Remarkably, given the fact that those are simply surveyor's sketches, he was very accurate in making a sketch, far more accurate than I probably would have been out in the field like that. And his drawings, once you adjust them to scale, actually fit together and form a complete map of this area. And on that map, you can see that the items labeled in black as flume, in green as flume, and in red clearly is a continuation of the flume bringing the cane to the mill and dumping the water into the ocean. There is no, so the line comes from over here, across the road, down along this way, and to the mill. There is nowhere in that sequence of 3 drawings that Lion labeled any part of this road. He has twice labeled it flume, And I think he simply didn't put it onto the third drawing because there was no need. It was already shown twice in his notes. He knew what he was showing. He was the one who came along in a couple of years and produced this drawing, which shows, again, exactly the same thing as a stream here. It's shown with the same line flowing in the center of it. It's shown with the same kind of hachur marks that people drawing in that day used to indicate every gulch that every stream flowed in. Those sorts of marks would not be put adjacent to a road. And since Lyon did all three of these drawings, the sketches in the notebook, the working sheet that you've been shown, and this actual published drawing, it's pretty clear he knew what he was talking about, and he interpreted himself as a stream. Okay, at the testimony given on October the 10th, Mr. Christensen introduced yet another new map which he claimed showed a landing at Papaikou and roads from that landing going wherever. This is the map that he submitted to council members. If you, when you looked at your package, this is the map that was in it. Ellis actually traveled around the island in 1823. He made a survey in a general sense in that he tried to put together some of the information that people already had along with names and so on. And he published this in a book. The American edition came out in 1825. This is the map of Hilo Bay that appears in that book. On the left side here, if I can, I'll try the mouse again if it will appear. Yeah, here we go. You can read the names: Maoli'i, Pu'ueo, Pona Hawaii. These are all names that we know as Ahupua'a. These are not the names of landings. There is a landing shown on the material that I gave to you. It is on page 52. And if you look at the top drawing there, you will see a boat landing identified. This is the landing called Kaopa. It appears on very few maps under that Hawaiian name, but that is actually the name of it in Hawaiian. And on this map, on page 52, the sketch that Lyon did there, you'll see the road on a line that leads up from that landing onto the adjacent land. This is Pu'uiopaku. It's not Papaikou. It's the river mouth, one stream closer to Hilo. Anyway, let's go on. This is the detail from the 1827 publication of Lyon's survey and Ellis's survey and his travels. This is the English edition, and you'll see that Papaikou is on that map, just as Christensen has said. However, the other names that are on that map are Kahua, Kalai Nui, Pu'ueo, Pona Hawaii, again the names of Ahupua'a. The name of the one landing that we know that has been identified on maps, Kaopa, should be between Papaikou and Pu'ueo if this were a map of landings. In fact, it is not a map of landing. It's a map that simply shows place names and those place names that he identified were the names of Ahupua'a. Ellis traveled, when he did his survey, by canoe. He traveled by horseback. He traveled on foot. For the section of the coastline from Hilo to Laupahoehoe, he traveled in a canoe. He did it all on one morning. He describes it as being a several hours long trip. He mentions no landings at all in his write-up on what he saw. And so I have little doubt that what he's showing here are Ahupua'a. This is a very interesting map. A few years later, it's the first map of this area that was actually drawn by a Hawaiian whose name was Kalama. He was a student at Lahaina Luna on Maui. He drew a map that is very important today because it's one of the earliest records, certainly the earliest record by a Hawaiian, of Ahupua'a names all through the islands. He didn't just draw the island of Hawaii, he drew all of the islands in the Hawaiian chain. And so what this map is known for today is not for identifying landings, it's for identifying Ahupua'a at a very, very early stage in Hawaii's history. Okay, the next thing I would like to deal with is the whereas number 15, which is the one that deals with the Highways Act of 1892. It says there may be a public right to overland access to the beach at Papaikou based on the Highways Act of 1892, prescriptive usage, implied dedication, or other legal means. The operative word in this whereas is the word may. Both the county and Naʻauehele have written definitive letters on this matter with respect to the Highways Act. Sugar Company closing records and our own records show that there are no grounds for prescriptive usage or implied dedication. This issue requires proof to succeed, not a maybe. A number of those who in testimony to the Finance Committee have claimed this sort of right through the earlier generations of their families will find that those earlier generations were entirely aware those rights did not exist and signed documents so stating. This idea is mentioned in the resolution several times, so I think it's worth it to just lay out some of the rigor that was involved in property closing efforts. This is part of one of the property closing documents. It's from 1954. It shows a map of the Papaikou area, and in red you will see on that map the numbers 11 and 12. These are two entry points to the land around Papaikou Mill, and at the date of this closing, that is where the land was closed. These records were quite extensive. They included not only maps, but also affidavits. They included details of the notices that were provided to the public, and they also provided, I think interestingly, this is another listing just of the roads that were closed at that particular time. 725 and 727. I think Hilo Coast changed the naming and numbering of them, but that's what they were at that time in 1974. Now here is a page from the Onamea Sugar Company 1959 closing records at barricade number 11, the one that I showed you, which is roughly at the location of Pinky's store today. This, this is interesting to me because these records are quite extensive. They're not quite as extensive as a 5,000 name petition, but they're extensive in terms of 1,000 names that were recorded over the years by the plantation. And on this one, I think there's particular interest. A second from the bottom, on the first column, you will see the name of Eulalia Tulang. Mr. Tulang was right there. These are really interesting documents for people in the community to look at, because many of them will never have seen the signatures of their grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on. But it's, I think it's important here to point out that testimony was given at the last community gathering by this gentleman's wife, to the effect that they used the plantation land quite freely over the period of time that she was there. Her husband recognized that the Onamea Sugar Company has given me permission to use this road, signed on that document. Mrs. Tulang actually signed the documents herself. Her signatures are in these documents in 1962. Just one more page from this, because I'd like to cover many of the people who did testify to this effect. Most of the Estelori family, for example, are covered in these records. And here you'll see the name of Henry Estelori right here, and the other brothers. There are 3 brothers in that family. The other 3 brothers all signed These records covered not everybody. They simply covered the people who required to have access because they were working that day, because they needed to go to the doctor or the post office or whatever reason they had to use the road. They simply signed this document. They were allowed to enter the property and do what they needed to do. In those days, I think this is important to point out, they didn't mess around with doing this sort of thing. They followed the laws. When they closed the land, they closed it with the work of hundreds of people. People like the managers, Nairn Campbell, Larry McLean, and by the way, they didn't just get the names, signatures of people who were the common laborers or the wives of the common laborers. The mill managers, when they crossed these lines, also had to sign the documents. But we have names of people like Thomas Crabb, Joseph Gomes, and people like Clarence Salvador, who actually manned the barricades through the night to keep these in place for the 24-hour period. If you pass this resolution, make no mistake, you are changing this history. You are setting a precedent. You are saying that those who follow the laws that the government itself sets are wrong. They're wrong to believe that government will hold up its part of the bargain. They are wrong to believe that leaving the land open to the community is the right thing to do. I think that's the clear message of these documents. People did things the way the law told them to do them. They operated according to the law. They expect you to operate that way as well, and to respect the work that they did in the hundreds in those days in order to keep the title of the plantation lands intact. I'd like to stop there briefly and let John Cross pick up for us in Hilo if he's available to speak.
I'm sorry, what? Mr. Cross, will you come forward, please? Mr. Cross, please identify yourself in the microphone.
My name is John Cross.
Please go ahead.
I'd like some clarification. Is this part of Jim Waugh's testimony? Because I do have signed up for my 3 minutes.
Yes, from my point of view it is.
Okay, you're calling in forward for part of your presentation.
That's right.
Mr. Cross, this is not your 3 minutes of testimony. Go ahead.
Okay, I came to work for Mauna Kea Sugar Company in 1984. When I arrived there, the mill site was just being cleared for the installation of a fence to keep people out of the mill. There was no trail where the current trail that Jim built exists. It was not there. The way to get down to the beach was in the front of the mill, more to the east. As the beach receded, the surfers and people actually broke through the chain and walked through the mill. This was not good. That mill was falling down and it was a danger. We excluded the surfers when we could, when we saw them. We excluded them from crossing the property and endangering themselves and opening up the company to liability. So I'd like to say that there may have been a trail during plantation operations. There could have been pig pens. There could have been some activity well prior to my employment. But certainly in 1984 and all the way up until the land sold to the Waws, there was no trail that existed on that back side of the property. The other thing about this, my testimony in support, I should say in opposition of 308.
Just a moment. We're still in the presentation portion, so if you're going to do your personal testimony, you're going to have to wait. Yeah, this is part of it? Okay, Mr. Cross, go ahead.
It is not part of it. Is this book here, the Public Shoreline Access, this was never acted upon by the county. The actual road that shows up in there actually goes down to the cane pit. And when this was done, the property was already gated off. So I'm not too sure how they could have put a public access when it was already gated off at the time of this report. I am finished.
Thank you. I should let you know you've got a little more than 9 minutes of your presentation time. How much more do you have? We allotted 50 minutes to your presentation.
I understood you to say we could be here all night.
Yes, I don't know how many testifiers are coming. I think there's only 11, but we were prepared to be here quite late if there was public testimony, or if the council has questions. But your portion of the testimony's got a little more than 9 minutes.
Okay, we'll try to be quick. The next item I'd like to deal with is whereas number 24, which deals with section 115-2 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. This section, this chapter, was enacted to encourage the counties to create shoreline and mountain accesses where there are none, as it says in 1151, for miles. It is an unfunded mandate. Honolulu, the major surf location in East Hawaii, is barely 1 mile away, not miles distant. Also, the permitted access at Mill Road in Papaikou has, despite this surf spot's much smaller capacity, rules modeled on those used at other county beach parks and water parks. Access might actually end up being more restricted than it is now if the Papaikou access were taken by the county, once the county has reviewed its potential liability and taken into account the reasonable protections needed by adjoining residents. Under 1153, there needs to be some consideration taken of the fact that the present trail is not and could not be made ADA compliant or even safe for that matter. The county is already deficient in this regard and can ill afford to make itself even more deficient. A good argument could be brought against the county that if it is to spend new money on ocean access, it ought to go towards ADA compliance, which would benefit some tens of thousands of people, not just to purchase another non-compliant access where an access already exists and serves only a few hundreds of people. The clear intention of this statute is to provide access where none is available now. In the present case, permitted access has been provided for the current by the current owner for 18 years, a long and substantial record. Since the current owner is the only small landowner on this coast to be providing permitted access to the shoreline and provides it for free, this seems an inappropriate application of the statute, which would better be brought to bear against some of the neighboring properties which are actually closed, and the county itself is included on that list of closed properties. Condemnation and purchase would not necessarily change anything, and it would expose the county to substantial costs, first to acquire and on an ongoing basis in assumed maintenance and liability. Number 27, that this appears to be in the public interest. This appears to be a statement of belief rather than fact. While the courts have been generous with government bodies and how they define the public interest, it's hard to see how the public will be better served in any way by this purchase. The current landowner has not only built the existing trail, but also spends in excess of $10,000 a year to maintain it. Significant new investment must soon be made to prevent portions of the trail from sliding into the gulch. And if the resolution is carried out to protect a presumed increase in visitors from the hazards of what is in reality a little farm road through an unstable gulch in an old industrial site, the county would be taking on substantial and ongoing risks and real costs with essentially no gain from the point of view of access, whether permitted or public. Nor is there an obvious gain in terms of the rules governing the use of the access, since the existing rules are largely the county's own rules. The rules could actually become more restrictive, not less. The acquisition would leave the county open to claims that in taking the easement it had knowingly encouraged people to use a road the county itself has previously judged to be substandard, increased traffic at a highway intersection which has already had deaths, and has been judged by the state to fall below a standard required for the introduction of traffic lights, and to use a trail that as a farm road was neither intended for nor built for public use. The initial section of the trail is pressed up against a gulch containing one of the island's longest and largest volume streams, and that edge is undercut, constantly eroding and collapsing. This portion of the trail may well fall into the stream at some future date. A second significant section of the trail is also exposed to the stream and is built largely on fill and requires constant maintenance to prevent it from sliding into the gulch. The second and third sections of the trail pass by an old industrial site and expose users to that in an area that's impossible to properly fence. Would like to point out a couple of more things with respect to, well, let's just focus on whereas number 18, which says that this is a slope that's unusable for other purposes. The so-called path was built as a road to give heavy equipment access to the sugar factory for its demolition, and has already been used for this purpose, the demolition of 2 lower-level factory buildings in 1996. It remains eminently suitable for this purpose and will be used for this purpose again. Our road provides access to the back end of the factory buildings, and bringing heavy equipment up and down this treacherous slope is essential to the safe and efficient continuing demolition of the remaining buildings. The central portion of the sugar factory is a very crowded area and drops as much as 20 feet below the adjacent floor areas. It acts as a barrier to demolition vehicles, which would have to work from both sides of it, the front and back ends of the factory. Much work in this regard remains to be done. The road will in fact be required again for this purpose in the future, according to several of the contractors interested in the work now. It may well be that such uses are incompatible with a public trail, but this road is not unsuitable for the purpose for which it is originally built. It also provides access to our farm areas. Now, I can end there. I have more to say. I've already submitted it to you in writing, and I trust that you'll read the written part of the submission.
I wonder, Councilwoman Ford, if councilors have any questions on it.
Oh, I'm sure that we do. We're going to have to take public testimony first. You actually have a little, almost 2 minutes left if you have anything else you'd
Well,
like to say.
yeah, I would like to summarize something. Thank you. Some folks who've testified have suggested that we're not good people, that we're mean, we're bad people. And I once went to a community ag watch meeting up in Papaikou, and I happened to meet Mitch Roth from the prosecutor's office, and also the community policeman assigned to us at that time, to our area. And I told them of the difficulties that we have in dealing with bad behavior amongst the 99% of terrific behavior that we see, and gratitude and appreciation and decency. They kind of studied the situation, and they decided that the best tool for us to use to deal with bad behaviors is something called a notice of trespass. It's issued by a policeman. It's like a restraining order. It says, you know, you can't come on this specific place, which would be our TMK, for 1 year. And after that year, you know, kind of paid your dues, and you can come on like anybody else. The consequence of breaking a notice of trespass is automatic arrest. So we've had 3 arrest incidents on our property in 18 years. First one was just that. It was our neighbor, Steve Estelore, who kept coming on with the dog, and when we were away, our 70-year-old local retired chef, house sitter, it warned him, and on the 6th warning, he just called the police for support. Long story short, Steve was trespassed, and a few months later broke the notice of trespass. The second and last arrest that I'll tell you about was on a day of closing when the late Norman Lyman was our guard, and he couldn't come until 9 a.m., so we always guarded the gate. This is a day of closing, remember, the one day a year we have. So Jim was away. I had to be the guard from 6:30 a.m. until Norman arrived. Four young men arrived. They would have none of it. I said, we're just closed for this one day. I explained the law and how you have to close. Oh no, one of them, Jeremy and Nova, goaded the other 3 young men to jump over the gate with him. I ended up calling the police for support, and here's why they were arrested. Not for jumping over the gate. The police went down to the beach and asked them to come up, and the policemen had their backs turned to the young men filling out the paperwork, the notice of trespass, when one of the young men escaped. And the police, so I had been called back out and said, hey, where's the 4th guy? And the policeman turned around from the tailgate and said, where's Anoba? And the young men, well, long story short, it turned from a notice of trespass into an arrest because one of the guys escaped. I was really conflicted about that. But I call on the police occasionally to support me, so I didn't feel it was my place to second guess their actions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start the public testimony on this particular item. So Hilo, will you call your first testifier, please?
Our first testifier in Hilo is Carrie Marks, speaking on communication 853 and 853.1.
Good afternoon. I just don't even know where to begin. That was a baffling array of maps. I have to admit, you lost me in about the third one. Have you ever met two people that clearly don't get it more than these two? That would be my question to you. Public access is a right. Public access is a right. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Ms. Marks. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Jennifer Ruggles, speaking on resolution 308. Oh, sorry, she just stepped out. The person after that would be Francis Malani, speaking on resolution 308 in opposition.
Is that resolution 30? Okay, I see it. Go ahead.
My name is Francis Moku Malani Jr. and I represent Moku Aina. My kupunas, my ohana, my family, my friends, and everybody that belongs to Moku Aina. I have written testimony, 14 copies, and it's next to the proposal. Working, don't fix it. I heard that this proposal be denied. The following action is trashing the of eminent domain. The cost, liability, infrastructure, and maintenance. First point is the purchase is going to cost money. Isn't that why this committee is presenting this testimony today? It's about finance. Second point is the closing and opening of the hours. Who's going to pay it? Number 3, the personnel, money again. Showers, bathrooms, parking, trash, and lawsuits. If you come into my house, there are rules that you need to adhere to. Number 1, you need permission to come into my house. Number 2, take off your slippers or shoes. Number 3, don't make any kind of trash. Number 4, speak appropriately or whatever else. 5, you got to go home. The point is that there are rules or guidelines that you must adhere to if I allow you into my holly. The owners welcome those that follow certain simple guidelines. Otherwise, no come. Speaking for society, my family, and mostly speaking for my children, I will not accept spending any money in this economy or any time for a problem that has an appropriate solution. I haven't signed this document, but I'm willing to sign the document after I'm done testifying. My name is Francis Moku Malani Jr. I am the steering senior committee member of Moku Aina. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malani. Our next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Jennifer Ruggles, representing Global Hope, speaking on resolution 308 in support.
Aloha. I just would like to remind you all of the last hearing for those of you that weren't there, that there were 275 people there. If you can picture the gym went full of people, all wearing these palaka bands in solidarity of the plantation times, and all in solidarity that they want this public trail, their trail back. The presentation alluded that, okay, there's already access, and it's already open to the public, and that they use common sense rules taken straight from the county's rule book, like no baby strollers or water bottles and their ability to arrest anyone they feel like. And by the way, everyone is still trespassing on their land. So people feel unwelcome, and the community feels unwelcome. Also, what's the point of proving a receding beach unless they're trying to say there's no point of providing access? Even if it was receding, wouldn't we want to use the current route? Because it would be much cheaper than building a whole new route through the mill if the beach isn't even going to be there in however many years they're predicting. I thought it was a very vague 20-minute history lesson, which I would, we should really question the credibility of. All we want is public access, and that history lesson was really kind of a distraction against really the alternate route. What is the alternate route they're proposing? No one knows yet. We still don't know. And he also said that the road was built to provide access to the back of the mill. That means that that road was there before they moved in. And he also said that we're wrong to believe that leaving the land open for community is the right thing to do. And John Cross says the trail wasn't there. That's not up for debate anymore. We saw 270 people there all wearing the bands. We heard the testimony, 40 people testify that there was a trail there. And yeah, to remind you, 5,463 people say that we do want public access. And that there was a trail. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Pahoa. Barbara, you have a testifier?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Our testifier is Robert Patrici, and he is speaking on Resolution 308.
Hello, Council. I'm speaking in support of Resolution 308 today. Obviously, the issue is important, and as we come to grips with our continuing loss of ocean access, and we need to be vigilant to protect our ever-vanishing access to the forest and the beaches and our other resources. I'm no fan of eminent domain, but in this case, I think it seems appropriate in light of the access restrictions that have been placed on the trail and the lack of parking that has caused problems for the community and larger island residents in being able to use this beach. Closing the beach, there was testimony they closed the beach for 1 day a year, and that they've had people arrested for using this beach. I just think they don't get it. I have to agree with Kerry Marks. They just don't get it. They live in a different world than the rest of us. And while that may be nice for them, there's a lot of people that we have very few places that we can go down to the beach on this island and out there in particular. And those places should be public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next testifier from Hilo.
Our next testifier is Dwight Vicente, representing the Hawaiian Kingdom, speaking on Reso 308, Communication 853.10.
Good afternoon, my name is Dwight, I'm representing Kingdom. 308-12. Now, the history that you just heard has to be questioned. That's not the Hawaiian Kingdom's history. Hawaiian Kingdom, you got the Great Mahele, which created land title, and native tenant rights of reserve from the mountain to the ocean. Native tenant rights was among natives to set up the rules, not a foreigner that's here without a valid treaty. And when they talk about breaking rules, talk about trespassing, you're trespassing on this kingdom lands, which is crown and government lands. You don't own it. The kingdom owns these lands. So I hear a lot of false statements. They cannot back up any of the things they said. They're trying to show that there was never an access. Hawaiians was here, they didn't even leave much traces of where they've been and what their activities were. But we've been here a long time. And we've crawled all over this mountain, from the mountain to the ocean. So for them to come by with a map drawn up by some foreigner, and some foreigners making decisions what Native Hawaiian activities were, you have to question these guys. So I think they better go look at the history. They're not the owner. The Hawaiian Kingdom is the owner. You can have a contract between the kingdom and a private individual, but not between two private entities or parties. And Seabrewer is not a legally doing business here in Hawaii. They participated with the overthrow and even the Bennett Constitution. So for Seabrewer to say they own the land, they're foreigners. They don't own the land. The Hawaiian Kingdom owned the land. They may have gotten a contract for the use of the land for up to 100 years subject to native rights. But the treaties were invalid, so they can't be here to do business. And it goes for a lot of other people. Some of the names that showed were contract slaves, which majority of the people were brought over by the plantation were contract slaves. They were here for 3 to 5 years. Although the Hawaiian Kingdom had laws to naturalize, most chose not to be naturalized to this kingdom. The few that did claimed to have dual citizenship. And after the removal of the Queen, there is no laws to naturalize or no treaty existing at this present time. So I'll reserve the rights of this kingdom under the Queen's protest of January 17, 1893 against U.S. Minister Stevens. It is yet to make its way to U.S. Supreme Court, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2, original but limited jurisdiction. And the other one is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is yet to go to the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. The Northwest Ordinance has no jurisdiction over this kingdom from 1887 till present day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vicente. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Niels Christensen, speaking on Reso 308, representing the Surfrider Foundation, sorry.
I've spoken before to you. I'm a land surveyor. I'm also an oceanographer. I have a PhD in oceanography. I've done extensive work on shore processes and beaches. I'm a third generation land surveyor. I've surveyed here in the islands for about 18 years. And it kind of is ironic that you have somebody giving you testimony about surveys and about beach processes when you have an expert before you. And there's so many misconceptions, untruths, omissions in what you just heard. It would take at least an hour to go through them and give you the underlying information you need to even consider this. And I didn't come here to refute them. I came here to make two new points that I think are important because, and this is to refute some confusing information that was put out before. So now we've got a whole new list of confusing facts, so to speak. What I came here to say was one of the big issues that keeps coming up is that the parking is inadequate, the traffic is a problem, and I just wanted to point out that every beach that I know of here in Hilo has the same problem. I go to Richardson's about every Sunday, and if you go down there on Sunday, the little side road, there's only one lane, there's cars parked on both sides, there's a parking problem at Richardson's. If you go to Honolulu and there's the surface up, there's only room for one car to get through because people are parked on either side. It's the same at Papaikou. That's what was always the case at Papaikou, and it's the case of our beaches. We just have that situation where we have parking problems. In spite of that, the public has come forward and offered to try to mitigate that. The adjoining landowner that they keep talking about, they're talking to Steve Shropshire. He came to us 2 years ago and said, I've got land next door, I'll do what I can to help relieve the parking situation. Store put in a new parking area. If you go down there, the little parking area behind the store is quite adequate for most of the traffic. I've never even seen that full. They put in another area that was for people to use to go to the beach. It would increase the traffic through their store. Well, somehow they got the word that there was liability, the road might be closed off, and they made that parking not available for people going to the beach. I'm sure if the county acquires this right-of-way, the Pinky Store would be glad to let the county or lease that land and use it for parking to alleviate the problem on the road.
Please summarize.
There are ways to solve that. That's not an issue that needs to be considered. The only other thing I wanted to say was bringing up the fact that they are allowing, public access. Well, they're not. But if they are, why are they fighting this? I mean, that's all we're asking for. If they say they're always gonna allow the public to use this trail, why not just go ahead and give us an easement so that the public can use the trail? So.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Thank you. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Leilani Bronson, speaking on Resolution 308.
Aloha and mahalo for this opportunity to provide testimony in support of communication item 853, supporting resolution 308-12. My name is Leilani Bronson Crowley and I reside in Lower Kuna. At your October 10 site inspection and public hearing in Papaikou, the committee members saw the jewel that is the beach, realized the overland access necessary to reach it, and heard the overwhelming community support to protect its continued use. Also at that hearing, Mr. Waugh stated that when he and Ms. Prickett purchased their property in Papaikou in 1995, they wanted to leave their land open for the people to continue to cross to access the beach, as their daughter was also a surfer. He described his action to leave the land open for him and the community as, quote, arrogant, thinking that it would affect other landowners to follow suit. He concluded in that testimony that now he did not hope or he did not think others would ever follow in his footsteps. The Waugh, Prickett, Ohana have been aware of their part as stewards of this property, as it were, and all that it implies. It is a shame that in the past decade, ho'oponopono, or some form of agreed upon mediation, was not used to continue good relations on beach access over this site. However, over the past 17 years, this has gotten complicated along the way, and we find ourselves here today considering taking portions of their private property for the good and benefit of the public to ensure beach access forever. Resolution 308-12 was brilliantly written by staff, pointing out the historic and current uses of the two parcels of land in question for the committee. It in itself is the best testimony one could state on this matter. While there have been a few other uses of eminent domain for acquisition of property for public beach parks, none is on point to the issue at hand, making Resolution 308-12 unique and the first of its kind, that of undertaking condemnation proceedings for the sole purpose of acquiring public access to a beach area. Again, I'd like to thank the staff for their assistance in locating public records and being congenial and helpful to me as a concerned member of the public. And in closing,
You summarize.
yes, I hope you support this finance committee. This would be a legacy for you, for now and for the public, and it would go into perpetuity. Mahalo.
Thank you. Please bring forward your next
Our
testifier.
next testifier is Mr. John Cross, speaking on Resolution 308, in opposition.
John Cross, I have presented for you in the previous meetings a copy of a Pala dated March 1862, and when Kamehameha IV deeded to Pa'au'au, the LCA, the Kuleana, number 4645. This is the map. It shows Kuleana Hale, the house, taro thatch. No other marking on there said Alanui, Alarahiko, Kuamo'o. There was no trail at that time. This is Niels Christensen's map, 2011. In pink is the Kuleana and the trail crossing through the Kuleana that supposedly existed prior to 1892. Well, I don't think Mr. Pa'au'au would have really appreciated people walking through his house and through his taro patch. That would not be appropriate. The other thing about this survey, I want you guys to walk away with this thought. Slander of title. The Waugh's property is being slandered. Their title is being slandered by an illegal survey. The proper way to do this is you negotiate, you work with the landowner, and you create an easement after you have reached your solution with the landowner. This way, you create an easement first, go and describe it all, attach it to a resolution, and then call it macaroni. You're going to have your easement. It was done the wrong way. You've got to negotiate first, then describe your easement.
Thank you. Please bring forward your next testifier.
Our next testifier is Donald Michael, speaking on resolution 308.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Donald Michael, and this is regarding Resolution 308-12. And resolution itself. In 2010, I managed a picket lot property when they were away. On September 25th, I was out on the property harvesting bananas and heard the dogs bark. Near the top of the trail, I found Niels Christensen and two younger men who surveyed with me. I asked who they were and what they were doing. After we were introduced, I realized Mr. Christensen from conversations with Rickerson from article in the paper. He said he was a teacher at UH teaching these young men how to survey. I told him that the owners had already surveyed their trail and were not wanting to do any survey work on the property. I told him that he should not survey anything that is on private property. He said it was a public trail. I told him it was not a public trail and it was on private property, but the public had use of the trail. He said he'd just like to take the guys down to the beach and show it to them, and I thought that was that. Well, the next day on one of my trips down to the beach to clean up and check it, I found survey stakes placed along the trail. I was surprised and angry that he did in fact complete a survey after I told him not to, through the owners. I did not in any way give him permission to survey. I would also like to say that it makes sense to me to vote down this resolution and let the landowners create their resolution to unreserved situation in which they find themselves. They have offered to build an alternate trail that gives them more privacy and is better designed to suit the requirements of public access. I'd also like to say that while I was there, I never felt that anyone felt unwelcome. People I was talking to on the trail or I would meet going in or out. So, thank you very much.
Mr. Michael, next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Kathleen Can, speaking on resolution 308 and communication 353.10.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak and give my testimony. My name is Kathleen Cown, and I have been a resident of this island for 44 years. I grew up on Oahu, and for the very brief times I have been to Papaikou prior to the owners buying it, there was no really safe trail. And it took me a while to go down to that beach with my young sons to appreciate the beauty. After they arrived and created this amazing trail, we revisited, and I was so happy that I could walk safely. I had access to the beach. My sons were happy about that. And as the beach became more popular, I saw problems arise. And it wasn't on any case with the owners. It was the abuse of the privilege of going on that beach. Abuse comes from the lack of knowledge of what they have done to improve access, public access. Not all the full story was told by whoever testified at the former Papaikou gym meeting. But after today, after hearing the thorough research and dedication that the owners have put into the history of the land, the maps that date back to 1878, that's hard evidence for me to show that they really love this property. They're not denying public access. They, in fact, have provided up and above what normal owners would do to allow public access to this beach.
and I do not support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Mr. Chris Ewan speaking on Resolution 308.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Chris Ewan. I want to thank you for spending the time to consider this important resolution. I just want to put into perspective what is being requested by this resolution. It's simply to purchase a public access, pedestrian public access easement across the Mill Road and down through the path that the council members took on the site visit about a week ago. There's been a great deal of discussion by Mr. Waugh and Ms. Prickett about the history of the area and disputing claims of the pre-existing rights to go across the land. The discussion of those of the old maps and of prior usage on the resolution is to show that there is a basis for the belief of many people that they have a right to go across this property as it stands now. But again, to put this in perspective, the idea of the resolution is that you're purchasing an easement across public property. It's essentially assuming that this is private property and that you have to pay fair market value for the purchase of the easement. Again, the issue of whether of the whole road, the maps, and the like is a matter of background. It doesn't affect the validity of the resolution, which assumes that that you are purchasing private property. There was the council has been very indulgent in allowing lengthy presentations by the property owner. I think that's fine. They're most effective people, but it's difficult in the short time available to go into the issues point by point, which I will be more than happy to do. Just to mention one thing briefly, there's been a great deal of discussion about the 1877, 1878 map. We have a photograph which shows the lower part of this road going to the wharf in roughly the 1877 period. I don't know why this is a matter of controversy. There was a road going to this wharf. And I would be, to mention just one other thing, I would be very hesitant to draw any conclusions about where the beach is going as a result of a series of photographs. I would also note that there's a big difference between a receding beach and a disappearing beach. One, whether if there may be a beach that's tending to move upstream away from the ocean, but there still seems to be a beach. On the other hand, what I'd like to say at closing is that for those of you who were at the public hearing, I think there are two messages. One is that this area is really important to a lot of people, and the second is that there's dissatisfaction, a great deal of dissatisfaction with the way it is currently.
Thank you. Please bring your next testifier forward.
Our next testifier is Tony Gutera, speaking on Resolution 308 in support.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Gutierrez. I work at the Hilo Coast. I heard our name mentioned in the program and all. I worked there 30 years and I actually live on the road. I lived there since 1983. Walls have knocked on my door and told me don't let anybody park in front of my house because it's their road. That's how they've affected our community. They've knocked on my house again with 2 policemen and said I can't go in my backyard anymore. This is after they gave me a fence that says, oh, we know you go down the river. Where do you want your opening? But okay, that's just how good they are about taking care of us. I wrote stuff because I know I'd get emotional, so here we go. As a community, Silverton Camp, we have been informed and manipulated. Nobody likes to use the eminent domain process. In this case, it must be used to protect and return to the community the public access of the river and the beach. Unfortunately, as the plantation closed down in its zeal to make money and unload any potential toxic liability areas, the plantation sold some quitclaim deeds that were apparently flawed documents. Example, Mill Road and the Beach Trail. As a result, cultural hunting, fishing, and gathering rights have at times been denied. When Puna Sugar went down, the workers were told thanks and offered some pretty good land deals. When Hamakua Sugar closed, the workers were told thanks and offered some good deals on their houses. When Brewer went down, they cut off our backyards, sold our roads, our trails, and our beaches, and gave us 8 weeks unemployment. They're still impacting our lives with some very bad decisions. Brewer sugar workers, as a distressed sugar company, were some of the lowest paid employees of the sugar company. The average pension for the guys 30 years is like $200. We need that beach to feed our families. They used it when they had 7 kids and 8 kids growing up. That beach was always for feed the families. So we're wondering, was our Silverton camp targeted because we're old and infirm and might not notice, or because of our beach road? How can a vacation house, it's not even their year-round home, overrule lifelong residents' cultural practices? Do they have similar problems at their other vacation cabins? They don't even use our road to get to the house. They use the Stropshire Road. Why the big interest in the road that took Silverton community 3 years to get restored? New streetlights and laterals. There's only one reason. It's easier to deny access to the beach. They keep saying they make it for everybody. They didn't. The road was cut for put the fence around there. That's why the road does not go all the way down there. One more swipe of a bulldozer would have been a perfect, beautiful access. My nephew just went with his boy, 8 years old, catch 4 or 5 new noise. This place has to be open. I mean, we're just temporary voices, and this is a permanent decision. You know, please, for our keikis, the grandkids, and everybody, Malama Pono, make this place for the peoples. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next testifier, please.
Our next testifier is Noelle Rodriguez, representing Global Hope on Resolution 308.
Aloha and thank you. I do represent Global Hope, but I want to make the point that I'm also representing, I think, the Silverton Camp Association that came together and support this resolution, and that's following Tony's comments. I heard many stories from these people. Some of them are afraid to speak up because they don't want to offend people. You know, there's a lot of tensions. But those of you who were at the hearing the other day know that there were over 300 people, and many of them using the armband showing that they want very much to have public access. I think this is really important to see the huge passion and energy of the people involved in, on this issue. I mean, we have now almost 5,500 people who have signed a petition wanting public access at this beach and wanting it to be public. You know, the question, how will the public benefit by public ownership? Well, you know, this is not a matter of it being up to the laws or whatever persons own that property, that it will be the county doing what the county is supposed to do by state law, and that is to buy public access to a public beach. I also want to say that I feel very strongly that we have to respect the laws and crickets, that we have to make sure that they have a sense of privacy and that they have a sense of safety and protection of their land. So I'm myself anxious to talk, but they have refused every effort we have made to make contact with them to discuss and you know, these issues. I think that at this point, with the people so engaged and passionate about this issue, that the one thing that the county should do is definitely go ahead and do by eminent domain the ½ acre of land that is the path to the beach. It's a ½ acre. So, and I hope maybe the Prickett Laws will begin to speak with the community in a respectful way about
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Please bring your next testifier forward.
Okay, our last testifier is Justin Avery, speaking on Resolution 308.
Yes, thanks a lot for having this hearing today. I'm Justin Avery. I've been a resident of this island for 15 years or so. I'm a homeowner, graduate of UH-Hilo, and I've been going to the beach over there for over 10 years with my friends, my family, and it's been a part of life in Hilo. And it's a nice beach. It's one of the few sandy beaches we get around here. It's kind of white sand even, so it's it's a rare beach around, and again, plenty of people go down there, and it's part of this community, especially part of the local Papaikou community, to have access to that beach, and so it wasn't until just the past year that people started getting harassed, unfortunately, for going down there. And this kind of friend of mine went down there with his family, and they had a police over there, and told me I had to go, at the beach with the trespassing. And my friend's a good guy. He's like, all right, sure, we'll go. And as a result, they haven't gone back there, after that. And I was just talking to them, not connected to anything, as I say, what do you think about this issue? And so that's what's happening slowly, is that people get kind of this bad taste in their mouth from going down there. They got police, they don't want to go down there, and so what's happening is that people are being marginalized from this public beach, and that's not very cool. And they had access to this beach before the current owners bought the place, and so when they bought it, there was access. While they've been living there, there's been access. And now they want to limit the access. That's not very cool. With all these folks that have been going in there for years, with their families and friends and surfers, and it's such a great surfing beach. It's part of the community. And so I really think if there was another avenue, like through dialogue or mediation, whatever it might be, that would be great. But it seems clear that that's not an option at this point in time. And it's unfortunate. And I hope that the council can go forward with the eminent domain process, because it seems like that's what we have left at this point in time. And even though I have a couple.
Please stop, guys.
All right. And I just hope, I just want to put out there that there was Prickett had a nice opportunity to give a 50-minute report, and I know that there's some expert response to that, and I hope that the council will listen to Mr. Ewan and Mr. Erson there about the kind of a counter to that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Is that the last testifier?
Yes, it is, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you. Staff, would you advise me if we have Helen Parker, Nancy Crawford, Lauren Lee, hold on, or any of their representatives present in the audience?
We only have Ron Thiel from Public Works here.
Okay. Mr. Thiel, would you come forward, please? Mr. Thiel, I'm not going to ask you to tell us about anything in particular. I just want to know which items that you're here for.
The one right before this, Bill 314.
That would, the parking lot?
Bill 314.
Okay, that's the only one you're here to speak to, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I'm going to take this one first, and then I'm going to go to Papaikou Beach. I'm sorry. So, Mr. Clerk, we're going to take Communication 869, Bill 314. Amends ordinance number 12-87 as amended relating to public improvements and financing thereof for the fiscal year July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2013. As the Public Works Pona Hawaii parking lot project for $450,000 to the capital budget. The proposed parking lot near the corner of Pona Hawaii Street and Kilauea Avenue to accommodate retailers, their employees, and shoppers in the downtown Hilo area. This was introduced by Mr. Ikeda. Mr. Ikeda.
Move to approve Bill 314.
Second.
And file all related communications.
Follow related communication. Yeah, this,
Second, please. Just a moment.
Mr. Blas.
Mr. Blas is the second. All right, please go ahead, Mr. Ikeda.
Yes, the reason I brought this up was that I had a meeting with, I thought it was Parks and Recreation, I couldn't remember, but it's actually Public Works. I was informed that, I'm not sure the exact company and want to use this for staging area. They were gonna clean the area on Puna Hawaii, and this other $450,000 is eventually to pave the parking stall. Is that correct, Mr. Gino?
Yes, it was identified as a parking area for the downtown, and it would start out being a staging area and then ultimately develop into a public parking lot.
Yes, yes, so that's my understanding. It's gonna be quite inexpensive, where a lot of the work is gonna be done ahead of time, and we just come up and do the finishing work.
Are there any other comments on this particular
No, that's it.
issue?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Teo, do you have this map in front of you?
No, I don't.
Staff, can we get him a map?
Are you asking about the location of it?
Yeah, because if you're looking at it, this is Puna Hawaii Street, this is Cam. Okay, and the parking would be in which lots?
It would be, the parking would be Malca of the service station. They include about half of that parcel.
Lots.
Mr. Onishi, is there a
Yeah,
problem?
we're just trying to, now you got, so I'm just wondering, why is it all cut up?
I think that was a previous subdivision, I don't know.
Okay, and so county owns that whole
All of
area?
it. Yeah, it's in the parks jurisdiction.
PNR's jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's gonna be a gravel parking lot for now, or staging area?
Well, I'm not sure how much is going to be accomplished with the staging. I think it would be that, but what we're talking about is trying to complete it to paved parking lot so it can be used for the public.
So, Ms. Chair, can I ask Mr. Ikeda a question?
Yes, you may, Mr. Onishi.
Thank you.
Mr. Ikeda, is that all right with you?
Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Onishi.
Thank you. So the initial work is gonna be done by volunteers?
No, it's a private industry that's gonna do it. I think, I'm not sure what company, is it the one that's putting the sewer line right now?
Well, there are two different projects. There's one at the Reed Bridge that they're looking for a staging area, and the other one was on Kilauea improvement. But things have changed so much lately, I'm not sure the extent of the staging that they need.
So it's going to be done by a private company,
So the prep work will be done by this private, and then hopefully with this $450,000 that can be the paving of the area.
That's correct.
Afterwards, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yugon?
Thank you. Is there anyone from Parks and Recreation in Hilo?
I
think this is Public Works.
No, but the land is under
No,
the jurisdiction of
there
Parks and Recreation.
There's no one here from Parks and Rec.
They're all the same.
Okay, I'll address this to Mr. Ikeda. So, Mr. Ikeda, the Parks and Recreation Department, first of all, was this property acquired as some type of fair share in lieu of for Parks and Recreation? And that's my first question. And number two, second question is, one second. Second question is, so did the Parks and Recreation, were they okay with providing this as a parking lot?
In fact,
They're
they're the ones that approached me and told me about this project. That they wanted to, because Danielle was interested in putting a parking area downtown Hilo, and I was looking around. They knew that I was interested in that particular area. And so they approached me that they have this so-called staging area that private companies wanted to use, and they were willing to clean the trees and everything up and prep the land so that they could store the equipment, or like, as I say, a staging area. After they get through, then the Parks and Recreation, and that's the reason I got confused, because it started out with Parks and Recreation, all of a sudden Public Works is involved, so like I said, I got kind of confused, but I know it was through Parks and Recreation that initially started this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ikeda. I mean, I have no problem with what is being proposed here. I just want to make sure that if this property, for example, was given to Parks and Recreation, say, for example, in lieu of fair share, for example, or part of a development to utilize as a park for the area, legally, can we just switch this over to Parks and Public Works to do a parking lot? That's all I wanted to make sure.
Mr. Yagar?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Teo wants to kind of make a comment on your question.
Good, very good, thank you.
Councilmember Yagong, we've been working with the Parks Department on this. Part of this area has already been designated as a park, as a parking, and we worked out I believe it's the SMA on it. And Parks is in the position where we develop it and then they'll take it over and maintain it. So we are and will be working with them all the way through this project. So it's not something that Public Works is taking on by themselves.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't land that was promised for park space, for example, for a playground or what have you, and then we're going to turn it into a parking lot. That's all I wanted to make sure, because I support the project in general. So to your understanding?
So one last comment, we're only looking at developing half of this. The other half will still be available as a park type activity in the downtown area.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm satisfied with that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, one more thing.
Yes.
Okay. I guess to let council members know too, along this Pona Y, there's an open space, but there's also a berm that was built, and that was because on the north side of that berm, there's a flood control. And at one time, it did overflow where the flooding came into downtown Hilo. So, to my knowledge, I think they built that berm to come down and kind of turn right towards Cam Avenue. And that's to keep the water towards, like Pauahi Street going towards a soccer field. And that was to prevent the water from coming into downtown Hilo already. So, there's the property is maybe about 50 yards wide or less than, like maybe 40 yards wide to the berm, but it's a long piece of property because it's from like behind the fire service station, and it goes all the way to the corner of Pono Hawaii and Kilauea. But there's a berm, so the width of that property is only about maybe 40 to 50 yards at the most. Okay, and that's where we're talking about. So if you folks know on Ponoy where there's Koji's Lunch Shop, it's like right across there. Okay, and that's the area that they're talking about. So it's not like a big area where it's like a nice park, like a nice where you can put playgrounds and everything like that. Okay, so just to let people know where it is.
So to give you more information, that this map here shows that property is about 100 feet wide, and the berm is on one side of the road. Hawaii is on the other.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please take the roll call.
Mr. Blas.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Ikeda.
Aye.
Mr. Onishi.
Aye.
Mr. Pilago.
Aye.
Airport.
Aye.
Airport, you have 7 ayes.
You miss me, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Yagong.
Aye.
Apologies. Airport, you have 7 ayes.
7 ayes. Who voted no?
No, we had 2 absent. We have Ms. Smart and Mr. Yoshimoto.
And then we should have only 7 votes.
You have 7.
7, not 8, right?
7 ayes.
Thank you. Sorry, I got confused. All right, so that Bill 314 moves forward to council with a positive recommendation. Okay, we're now going to go to communication 853, resolution 308-12. Provides for the acquisition of easements in private property by eminent domain, being a portion of tax map key numbers 3-2-7-004, parcel 118, and 3-2-7-027, parcel 065, situated at Papaikou district of South Hilo, to provide a pedestrian public access easement to the beach at Papaikou. Authorizes the Office of Corporation Counsel and the Department of Finance to initiate proceedings in eminent domain to acquire the 2 above-mentioned parcels for the purpose of establishing public pedestrian access to Papaikou Beach. This was introduced by Mr. Yagong, held over for a site visit and public hearing October 2nd, 2010. And note, there's a pending motion by Mr. Yagong and duly seconded by Mr. Pilago to approve Resolution 308-12. Additionally, Communication 853.10. The presentation by James Waugh and Charlene Prickett regarding Resolution 308-12 from Councilmember Donald Ikeda, dated October 3rd, 2012, requesting time for a presentation by Mr. Waugh and Ms. Prickett for questions and comments from committee members. And by the way, that was requested at 50 minutes. So, may I have a motion by Mr. Yagong? May I have a motion, please?
I think there's a pending motion.
It's pending, I'm sorry, you're right. And that will file, not only possibly approve this motion, but file all related communications.
That is correct.
Thank you. Mr. Yagong.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, let me just say, folks, that the Hamakua district, which Papaikou is included, it's rural South Hilo, which is part of Council District 1. We're going through a Hamakua CDP plan, as you all know. And I will tell you, when you take a look at what has been generated thus far in the community, one of the most important issues facing the district of Hamakua, just so you know that this is something that's not a pie in the sky type of deal, but the most important issue facing Hamakua, as identified in the CDP, is access to ocean and the mountain, identified by the people of the district that I represent. And the number 1 area, or number 1 point of access that has been identified as the most important, and one that has been requested as one being a public access as important to the district, is a Papaikou Mill access, the issue that we're talking about here today. Council members, you know, it's you folks have been to the public hearing. You've heard from the general public. I wanted you to come out there so you can actually hear the people of the district and how they feel in regards to this very precious resource. And the precious resource is not the trail that goes down there. The precious resource is a beach that is not owned by the landowner. It's a beach and the ocean and all the recreational activities that go along with it. And not only recreational, but subsistence. As you've heard over and over, people utilize that as their ice box to help feed their children. And that's why the state, HRS, the Hawaii Revised Statute, Chapter 115, which is public access to coastal and inland recreational areas. Folks, this is the law of the land of the state of Hawaii. Chapter 115-1, finding and purpose of this particular chapter in HRS. The purpose of this chapter is to guarantee the right of public access to the sea, shorelines and inland recreational areas and transit along the shorelines, and to provide for acquisition of land for the purpose and maintenance of public rights of way and public transit corridors. That's the whole purpose of HRS. 115-2 that talks about the acquisition of land for public right-of-way and public transit corridors. It states, the various counties shall purchase land for public rights-of-way to the shorelines, the sea, and inland recreational areas. Notice it says the various counties. in section 115-5, where it talks about transit area and public transit corridor, it says, in areas of cliffs or areas where the nature of the topography is such that there is no reasonable safe transit for the public along the shoreline below the private property lines, the counties by condemnation shall establish along the Mackay boundaries of the property lines public transit corridors which shall be not less than 6 feet wide. That's HRS 115. You know, state law guarantees that what we understand that public access, and we've talked about it and you've heard testifiers say, it's not a privilege, it's a right. It's a right here in the state of Hawaii. It's certainly right here in the county of Hawaii. And the eminent domain process is an acknowledgement that it's a privately owned land, and what we're doing by HRS 115 is to acquire that land to guarantee the public access. Here's the thing, folks, I will tell you this. Use the eminent domain throughout the county of Hawaii. I don't see it happening very often, and the reason for that is how many properties abut a beautiful, spectacular black sand beach. Most of our shoreline is cliffs. Most of our shoreline is This is a very specific case of a resource that is truly unique and spectacular that has been traditionally utilized by the people of the area and of the island, and we should make sure we have that. Now, I really appreciate what the landowners have done on the land as far as doing the trail and so forth. And they've also asked the council to consider an alternative route. We all went on that site visit. You all took a look at that there. I just want to make sure that we understand a few things before we entertain that thought. You know, part of the testimony that was brought forward was that we got a copy of the deed of the property. And this is basically a deed that was signed. And this land basically was bought as is. You know, as you know, this was a former sugar mill site. This is a site of the Papaikou Mill. And you know, with that comes many concerns with hazardous material. In the deed itself, it states here that the grantee, which is the landowners, the grantees acknowledge that the property, more particularly described in Exhibit A attached hereto and made a part hereof, and the buildings situated thereon, have previously been used as a sugar mill with its related industrial and commercial uses. The property has been exposed to or used for and or the storage of gasoline, fuel oils, petroleum, lubricants, machine-related chemicals, pesticides, and other poisons, lime, molasses, herbicides, etc. In addition, various asbestos-containing products are also located on the property. So by signing the deeds, this is something, and the WAS have actually stated that they're going to be responsible for cleaning up the hazardous material and so forth. My concern, council members, is as we talk about this existing trail, as you saw, a wonderful walk along the shoreline, which actually walks into where the existing mill site is, that leads down to the beach. Well, what I did was I did call the Department of Health Site Discovery Assessment and Remediation Section. This is a hazard evaluation and emergency response office. And I asked them whether or not they had really assessed this property or not because of this possible trail that is running onto the mill site. I had an email from them this morning that says that in 2011, our site discovery team sampled out there and found dioxins at about 10 UG/kg parts per billion along the old foundation of the former pesticide mixing building located up on the hill behind the mill buildings. This detection is about 40 times the residential action level. That means 40 times above the allowable level of 240 Ng/kg parts per trillion. There is somewhat elevated arsenic as well. Additional sampling is needed to establish where the boundaries of contaminations are and whether the area proposed for transfer to the county is impacted or not. I did speak to the, I did speak to the landowners and they did tell me that they've never been notified by DOH regarding this, although in this letter that they emailed, they write, because I told them that the landowner said that they have no knowledge, and I wanted to make sure that where they did this sampling, is a property that we're talking about, because I don't want it to be on the next door property or in somewhere in a different vicinity. They wrote back again and saying that we have just confirmed that this is the same property where the DOH discovered historic contamination associated with the old pesticide mixing area. So I wanted to make sure that before we make this statement that they confirm that it's your property. So they're going to contact you and you know, let you know their findings and give you the results of the testing. So I guess what I wanted you, council members, as the discussion unfolds here, as we talk about the alternative trail, I am concerned that the trail does go into that pit that you're talking about and down to the mill side and down to where these buildings that they are going to be taking down. So I just want you folks to be aware of this, and what I actually hope to do is actually look at this particular eminent domain resolution and have us move this forward, and at the same time, you know, allow DOH to take a look at this property and make sure that, you know, this property is cleaned up as required by federal and state law. I'll just say one last thing before I close. You know, you all may have looked at the Big Island Video News that they did a wonderful report on the site visit that we took, and I think one thing that was really extremely it's bounced off to me that as being very significant in the video. Mr. Wall, as we were taking a walk down the trail, what he did say was that if you want to take a look at where the original trail is, or if you want to walk down the original trail, that he can show that to us. That in itself, when you hear all this talk about there's no trail, you know, Mr. Wall in that video is noted as saying that if you want to look at the original, I can show you what the original trail is. Obviously, not as nice as the trail that they made, but the key word in there was the original. And the last thing I'll say, and I want to thank you, Charlene, for what you did at the community meeting, as you said that in your zeal to help to protect this land, if something that you said to the people hurt them in any way or hurt their feelings, you said you apologize. And I appreciated that. But in a sense, I think just by that alone, it gives you an idea, you know, that when you have 300 people show up, with a vast majority of them wanting to make sure this is a public trail, and you put some of these things together, it gives an indication why the people feel that having a public trail, you know, that is under the control of government would be either more user-friendly or more something that they don't have to be concerned about possible problems that has occurred with some of the people within the community. With that, I yield. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Pilago.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just wish to give some updates on the legislative tracking for this item, this resolution 308-12. As you know, it was introduced and held over on October 2nd, and we all decided to go on a site visit on the 12th and held a public hearing that evening. There was a subsequent communication from different people, and 583.17 was rules as applied. This was a submission from the applicant. Following that, there was a submission 853.18, communication between the planning department and the applicant informing us that there had been discussion. This one in respect to shoreline access. There was communication 853.19, 1016. It was submitted to us. Councilor Makeda, he forwards this hard copy presentation which we had a chance to witness today. There's also communication 853.20 and 853.21, also submissions and information supplement from the applicant. And this brings us here today. I just wish to note that we have a lot of communication from different parties and a lot from the applicant. And thank you for your service. It keeps us abreast of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hilo, does anyone have comments over
Yes,
there?
I do.
Mr. Ikeda, you're recognized.
Yes, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that when I listened to the testimony on October 10th that there was a trail. But I don't believe that eminent domain is a correct or proper way to go about it. I believe the WAS understand that they have to offer some kind of public access. And I believe that maybe we should give them an opportunity to talk to the people from Papaikou and come to some kind of solution, because I think what the people want is probably, I wouldn't say 24 hours, but they want daytime as well as nighttime access, and I don't see any reason why they cannot leave the door open. But I think the problem really starts is because I think a lot of the people don't have respect for the land like the law does. You know, when we walked down the trail was full of weeds and elephant grass and so forth. I didn't think it was well maintained. I can understand why the law is concerned about not having dogs going down there. I wouldn't want dogs going down there either. I can understand why they're saying that no fires, and no drugs, no smoking. We don't even allow that in our own parks, you know, no drinking. But I can see they can provide some kind of a mechanism whereby they can allow fishing at night. And I think the walls might be a little more open to open every day of the year, because they're going to have to give them up anyway, because if we provide public access, they're going to lose their land anyway. So I think we should at least give them an opportunity to work with the community, whereby, you know, at the meeting on October 10, a lot of people said they'll volunteer to help clean up the area. So I think it's a good opportunity for them to talk to the people and have them sign up and really clean the place up and make it look a little more respectable. Because I, for myself, will never go back down there again, because when I got home, I got all kind of itches because of the grass and so forth. And to tell you the truth, I had cramps for 4 days walking up the hill. And I'm sorry, Mike, I can't answer any question, but I will talk to you later. But you know, like I said, I know, and you know, I would like to give the WAS an opportunity at least 2 weeks, because we still have 2 more meetings, and if they cannot come to some kind of solution, then I will support this resolution. But at this time, I cannot, and it really makes no difference, because once it gets to council, all it takes is 1 reading and we can pass it. So I think I'd like to give the WAS an opportunity to talk to the community and try to solve all the problems, because like I said, I think all they really want is public access, and which they're being, some of the people feel they're being denied, not all of them. But I still feel that the public also have to respect the WAS property and their privacy. And I think that is what they're not getting. But I have not heard anyone say that the WA is not a good steward of the land, because they are a good steward of the land. Maybe they're little over possessive, but still good stewards of the land. So, you know, I wish someone would come up later on and ask for at least a postponement for the next meeting, and give them the WAS an opportunity to try and solve some of the problems with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ikele. Anyone else from Hilo want to make a comment? Seeing none, Mr. Pilago?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, applicants, again for your presentation. What Mr. Ikeda brings up is very, very important. As we were there at that public hearing, you learned a lot of things, and he reminds us, Councilmember Ikeda reminds us that there was a lot of offers from community people to help. Your presentation that evening and this presentation today is very similar, almost the same. But the time that transpired between that public hearing and today, there were offers again to help from the community, to help discuss and negotiate these issues. So today, you would come before this council, this committee, after having had discussions in your community. And we were looking forward to some of that follow-up discussions. Have there been any follow-up discussions, and what were the results? Again, we would have been pleased to have heard some of positive movements at today's hearing.
Please re-identify yourself. Councilman Pelago, Charlene Prickett. There have not. Craig Neff has called us to say that he has invited, I think 65 people signed up on a sheet saying that they would like to come and work on the beach. And the only discussion that I know, you know of any? Craig called us to say he would like to bring a group down. We totally invite that. And at the last time I talked to him, I think it was yesterday. Well, in the last 2 days, he suggested it be Saturday morning. We were totally on board with that, early in the morning. I don't know, I just am leaving up to him.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for informing us that there have been some 65 people that had offered to discuss, at least within your community.
I think that
that's
they're
very
signed up to
important.
us.
And that's up for you folks, for you, and for your husband to follow up with.
Yeah.
We do have some time between this committee and the next, when this resolution, if approved, moves to council. We would hope at that time there would be a broader voice from that community as a whole. This council is anxiously, this committee is anxiously awaiting that. And just to let you know again, some of us did expect that presentation here today. Thank you.
May I say something else?
Sure.
We find ourselves in a strange position. We have this resolution in front of us, which wants to take it doesn't say an access, it says the current access. So while we feel we need to fight this off, our hearts say we'd love to make an access in a different spot that would be more suitable to its purpose, shorter, flatter, more durable, blah, blah, blah.
That's not here for today, but we thank you. Last time we discussed that very thing, it turned out some of that secondary access, that alternate access, 2/3 of that belonged to someone else.
But
So that's why we wish not to discuss that.
I don't think
here
that's
today.
the problem. I think that has resolution in the long term.
Thank you. But I just wanted to follow up with an important point that Councilmember Iqueras brought up and reminds us all, And I just wanted to add on that, you've had more than a couple times to do this and to bring in other community members, and we do wish at the next one you would have some. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Yes, thank you. Madam Chairman, I have a couple general comments. I hope this doesn't go too long. First of all, I don't think there's anyone on this council more supportive of public access to beaches than myself. Despite what I heard, I think, from Mr. Yagong, and I just would challenge him on one point, that the number of precedents that this bill or resolution would establish is small. That simply isn't true, and I only need to go along the coast along North Kohala to indicate any number of similar type of examples. So this does have a very important, I think, and critical precedent that would be set. And it's not something that I think we can consider lightly when we also throw in the idea of eminent domain. So regardless of whose ox is being gored at the moment, this has much more of an impact than I think we as a council understand. The difference, council members, is the difference between public access and public excess. And I think it needs to be carefully scrutinized. Number two, under any circumstance, the point that Ms. Pickett just pointed out was the one I've been trying to determine, the idea of the current supposed trail that's being used, that we walk down, and any other access across their property. I still think that that's an important issue that needs to be looked at. Because I'm hoping that in any type of an issue where we have eminent domain, the importance of which needs to be, I think, carefully examined, is not so much that we go down the trail that everybody went down 40 years ago, and I'm going to accept that content of their explanations were correct when the plantation was there and the mill was operating. They all went down this particular trail. I'll accept that. The point is, right now, today, things have maybe changed a little bit, and we need to ensure that there is an access to the public beach that is safe, that is secure, and that provides reasonable coverage for anyone who's looking at that. It doesn't have to be the only access there. I'm in favor of that. So I'm going to ask Charlene a question. I was taken by the comments that were made by you during the course of our walk through the area when you were indicating that there was this other access along the northern side, I guess, of your property.
Or eastern side.
Yeah, whichever way. Thank you. And then Mr. Shropshire pointed out that, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem with that I own some part of that property and I was never talked to regarding this. How about explaining that to me?
Thank you for the opportunity. Councilman Hoffman, Jim and I strongly opposed Mr. Shropshire's previous proposal to subdivide his 90 acres adjacent to our land for quite a high density subdivision. The whole community, well, a large community of Papaikou was against that proposal, that project. Jim and I were against the project, not the person. I think it's always best to discuss the project, not the person. So we only had 4 days' notice, that this resolution was coming forward. I'd asked Chairman Yagong about it in the spring, and he said he didn't know if he was going to bring it forward or not. I asked if I could see it, and I wasn't given it. So we were on the mainland and had 4 days to get back here, and we couldn't manage with flights to get back here. So we didn't have much time, and I said to Jim, do you think we should try and contact Mr. Shropshire about our idea that we cogitated on this summer? And we didn't think that we perhaps would be the best people to make that advance because of our position previously on his proposal. I don't know that was the right thing to do. I'm not sure I'm not sure whether we should have called him. I guess we should have called him before. I don't know if Jim wants to chime in here.
He doesn't seem as though he wishes to. He's allowing you to explain.
But
okay, I think
I have talked with Mr. Shropshire.
Subsequent to our
yes,
meeting on the 10th?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and what is his,
well,
I don't see him in the audience at the moment.
Yeah, it's not fair for me to put words in his mouth,
Then
for sure. But I can give you my impression. My impression is he owns a lot of land out there. He intends, and I think, he intends to go forward with some kind of development at some point. And I think he sees the trailhead where we proposed it out at the radio tower as a benefit to his future plans, whatever they are.
Okay, yeah, let me, instead of trying to go through things like this, here's my suggestion to you. I would much rather see an alternative solution be proposed here. I'm very hesitant to approve an eminent domain resolution on this type of an issue. I look at an eminent domain as something that is directly related to public health and safety. I like that idea. And although I understand what the state constitution is saying, and as I say, I'm a strong advocate of beach access, I'm not so sure that eminent domain is proper in this issue. If there is an alternative solution, then I would certainly be much more reticent to approve a resolution like this. You have 2 weeks, at least 2.5 weeks before this would come up again at full council, regardless of what the council decides. I'd suggest that you begin that process of calling up your neighbor and saying, look, maybe there's a way we can work together. Let me also remind you that you were in my office, I think, in June of this year, and I remember very carefully the conversation. One, I didn't have a resolution before me, so I suggested to you, let's not try to start going down a trail, I'm sorry to use that term, or going down this road without knowing what the resolution stated. But I did say, I know on more than one occasion, there must be some alternative that you can probably try to work out regarding, without knowing